They've challenged our heroes, caused countless atrocities, and driven our stories for centuries. Welcome to Dungeon Bits, and today we're talking bad guys, because every hero, be they humble or grand, needs an unforgettable villain to stand up against. But just in case, there is a sea of aroused supermodels all trying to break into your house to ravage your irresistible form, and you need to leave right now to plow through them like the lawnmower scene from Braindead, then in brief, here is what you'll need to make a great tabletop villain. Motivation. What do they want? Power. What will they do? And presence. When do they show up? But otherwise, if you have the attention span, or lack of an urgent appointment to go to right now, then let me talk more on these main points and follow up with a bundle of ideas to make your base villain even better. And of course, I would love to see the comments full of you guys' favourite villains in your games that you've run, played in, or, just enjoyed from games and movies. Let me know below. So, just like your player characters, your villain should have a motivation or goal. This may be one of the most important parts of making a villain, so follow along. Ask yourself, what does my bad guy want? The answer will very heavily shape what they are like. For example, Dr. Doofenshmirtz is a scheming evil genius who wants to take over the entire tri-state area, which is a humorous goal for a very incompetent and humorous guy. Meanwhile, Commodus from Gladiator is a cruel and venomous man who wants to be worshipped by all of Rome, and will do vile things to secure his place. Very different people with not massive differences in motivation. They both want to rule and, in some capacity, be loved. But what differs the two is how they go about it. Once you've asked why, it's now time to ask how. What will they do to reach their goal? This is where the villain goes from a boy with a dream to a seed of pure evil. One of the player characters and the villain may both be on a quest to cure their sick loved one, except one is a hero whose good deeds match their good intentions, and the other is Mr. Freeze, who will commit crimes such as theft, freezing you and leaving you to suffocate, and terrible ice puns.
You are not sending me to the corner.
If you're playing a grounded, non-fantastical game, then your villain may achieve their goals through treachery, like Iago from Shakespeare's Othello, or treachery and access to resources like Commodus, as mentioned before. He's a great guy. Meanwhile, villains in sci-fi or fantasy will probably have access to overwhelming magical or technological power to be a threat against the players who have access to the same magic and sci-fi tech. But maybe not. I have long dreamed for making a BBEG villain for a fantasy game who isn't magical in the slightest. They're just a chess master with an incredible tactical mind and very strong connections. The only thing to watch out for the chess master sort of villain is giving into the temptation to have your endgame villain just appear in the final act shouting, "Ha ha ha, it was me all along," and for the players to look at them and say, "Who are you?" And that's why they need presence. Asking yourself, when do they show up, is surprisingly important for an unforgettable villain, because, let's be honest, an effective villain would hire a legion of incredibly capable henchmen to do all the groundwork so they have a 100% chance of surviving to the end. But if your villain did that, then the players would never see them and would never associate all the problems that they have to adventure through with them. You have to keep bringing them back to show the players who they are fighting against and why they should keep fighting, either through notes, ambushes, or appearances where they appear and cockily relish in the suffering they've caused while they are in a state of being untouchable. And you might be thinking, I get the other two, motivation and how they do it, but what's with this final one? Why does it matter? Well, this is going to sound weird, but it's odd how much making a memorable villain is about
presentation!
Presence is asking, how often do the players encounter the villain? But it's also about making a villain that the players will love to hate, or hate to love. I don't think I've ever encountered a more nuanced and more fun compliment about my tabletop games than, "Ellis, you are so good at making hateable characters." And I gotta tell you, that touched my heart, because that's what you want from a villain. Someone who is so hated by the players that they will cut off their own feet just for the chance to slap them. And the other end of the scale is a villain who is definitely evil, but the players kinda love them, like Loki, Darth Vader, Hades, or most Disney villains. The secret is you gotta sing for 3 minutes at the table with no backing track, just a cappella at the heroes. So, what do they want? How will they get it? And do your players know who they are fighting? If you answer those, you'll have a good villain. But here are some tips to make them great and a memorable villain. And just try to follow along because the 3 concepts that I mentioned before may overlap a little bit. First of all, sounds obvious, but give them a good motivation, which is easier said than done. But avoid giving them motivations like wanting to be rich. Money is a tool to a goal, not a goal. Consider motivations like revenge, punishing an unjust world, saving or improving the world, conquering, making your home their new home, or saving a loved one. And the type of motivation you give really depends on what kind of villain you want. Like, a silly villain wants something silly, like cheese or the tri-state area, but an actual villain mainly falls into 2 categories: pure evil and purely misguided. A purely evil villain is a villain who your characters will feel good about killing because they're just terrible. They want something selfish and bad and do selfish and bad things to get there. For example, wanting to rule with an iron fist, bad, so they summon demons to give themselves power, bad. Or wanting to rule and be loved, so they kill their own father, kill the family of the true next in line to be the emperor, frame that person and sell them into slavery before stabbing them to rig a fight against them, all while trying to bang your sister. Meanwhile, a misguided villain is a person who wants something not completely evil, and even sometimes good, but their methods are bad, because villainy is about the actions and the lives you take. Like solving overpopulation problems and aiding disenfranchised groups, but doing so with blood and brutality. But that does bring me to the idea of tragic villains. People say never use them because they're villains who are genuinely good people or people who have been severely wronged, but their methods are only kinda bad or revealed to be good. So when you kill them, the players feel bad for playing, and I'm here to tell you that that's absolutely not true. Kind of. I can kinda see the point. In certain games, it can work, but everyone has to be on board with that dark, depressing tone going on. So, if your games are more fun and adventure-based, I would go for a villain who is just too evil to let run wild. They can have good intentions, like wanting to rule the world so they can lead it better, but their methods and presence should easily reflect that they're undoubtedly evil. And regarding presence, you could have it so that the guy who is all about fear is called Scarecrow, or the guy who uses their gimmick or expertise as both a weapon and a helpful tool such as Mr. Freeze. But if you want a hateable villain, it's more about how they act and what they do. You can quite easily make a hateable NPC by making them annoying or overconfident and pompous, but you can make a hateable villain by making them able to antagonize the players so easily that they have every right to be confident. A villain who is able to overlook the players' victories and keep escalating the threat they pose will make a very hateable villain. For example, I had a villain whose presence kept coming up because he had an insignia that literally left his signature on every atrocity he was responsible for. His face would show up in a crowd only to vanish without a trace, indicating that he was always watching. And then sometimes he would straight up appear before the players in the form of a clone to mock the players and even offer them deals. And it was revealed that killing these clones didn't matter to him, so they would appear, laugh at the players, cause pain, and even worse, he would appear with a book on his belt, a book that the players needed. And the first time they killed him and realised that not only was it a clone, but the book he brought was fake, was a perfect example of how sadistic this guy was. A first chapter or low-level bad guy will focus all of their attention on their plans and deal with these random heroes when they appear to foil them, but a villain has a special place in their heart amongst all of the stuff they have to do, devoted to tormenting your players for fun. I hope you enjoyed. I'm Ellis. Leave a like to help out the channel and check out the description for my socials and products. Also, click the video on screen, it should be right down there, to see my tips for making travel interesting, for when there is a long walk to the villain's secret volcano lair. I love you all, and I'll see you next Saturday.